Joining us from Miami, yes, nice shot in the background. Before we get to what you're doing, yeah, I'm more looking at the blue sky and the golf shirt.
I know.
I know. I just went and bought new golf shoes. Won't be using those for a while. Before we get to what you're doing in Miami and all that, Farhan, Trevor Harris, I said 95%. That he was coming back. Colson said 93%. He was always coming back, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was 100%. I mean, when you talked to him at the end of the season and he talked about how he had already begun the process with his family kind of to see where things were, and you knew that he really felt like he was at the top of his game, both from a physical standpoint and just his understanding of what needed to happen in order for him and his teams to have success. So, couple that with a Grey Cup win and just the great feeling around the province. And, he's also at a place where he has never felt this good. I mean, he's been a starter elsewhere, but just the way the community has embraced him and everything like that, he's finally hit the sweet spot of his career, and it's happened this late in his career. So if I'm him, I don't want to let that go. I'm sure he's making over $500,000 a year, so that's another thing you don't want to let go. So I think this was never a surprise that he was going to be back in green and white next year.
1 year surprise you, or is it kind of going to be a year-by-year thing with him now?
Yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me at all. I think it's always going to be a year-by-year thing. And he's earned that right. He's earned the right to earn more. He doesn't mind giving the team a right to step back and have a change in direction. And he does genuinely want to reassess it every year. How's my body feeling? Where's my family at? Do I need to be there more? Can I sacrifice to continue to do this? I think all of that, and again, I mean, you see certain coaches kind of have that luxury that they don't have to worry about it. They know that they've got a certain amount of leverage and they're in a pretty good position. And I think Trevor Harris feels the same way.
Domino effect for the Riders. Text line, some people are saying Hardrick and AJ. Some people are thinking MLS. If we're asking you that question, how do you think the dominoes fall here?
Well, I think it's got to be Hardrick first. And I say that because he's been the biggest difference maker for that offense in the last couple of years. And I think Sam Emilus is a fantastic player. Don't get me wrong. However, that team is deep at receiver. They're deep at Canadian receiver. Do you want to keep Sam Emilus? Might he be the best in their building? Maybe, but they've still got a lot of good ones there, whereas I think the drop-off at offensive tackle is significantly higher. And, and a guy like A.J. Allen on the defensive side and what he's allowed them to do defensively and with their ratio overall, he's been a real find in this Canadian Football League season. So as much as I think of Sam Emilus, to be truthful, if I had to rank those three in terms of importance for Jeremy O'Day to get done, I'd probably put Emilus at third. And that, again, that's no shot at him. It's just a reflection of how much I think of their receiving depth.
With the receivers that assigned Phil Pott specifically this week, where does that leave Emilus in your mind?
Yeah, I think it's going to be around the same number, maybe a little bit higher. They're represented by the same agent. So I don't know that there's going to be a big gap there, but I think the Keon Hatcher signing probably raised a lot of eyebrows, right? Not that he got 2 years and a big number, but an average of $315 a year. That's a big number for American receiver who's in his 30s. Now, I still think that Hatcher's got good years left. I don't think he's too old. I think he's earned it based on what he did last year, but he doesn't give him the ratio benefits that a guy like Philpott or Emilus do. So, might that push Rob Fry, the agent, to try to get a little bit more for his clients? It might. You never know. I don't think he's going to get paid more than Keon Hatcher, but, I think the gap between Philpott and Hatcher might be hit right down the middle with a guy like Emilus.
O'Day's in a tough spot, I think. So if you do go MLS at a little bit higher of a number or a number similar to Philpott, does that mean maybe a Kean Schaefer-Baker's on the outside looking in?
It's hard to say. I want to see how this is going to all shake out. Now, I do think they can't keep them all, right? I mean, basically, they're four starting receivers. If you had it at the start of the year, right, 2 Americans and two Canadians, all of them are free agents. So I still don't believe they can keep them all. But what you are seeing with the Hatcher deal is that all GMs are going with the new salary cap, right? So last year when they got the raise in the cap and it got up to $6 million, none of the GMs dealt with that. They basically worked off the lower number because it was after the free agency period started that everyone understood. And there was still some debate in the early stages about where that extra money was going. Is it going to get spread out over the cap to everybody? What's that going to look like? Whereas now GMs know what they're dealing with, and the cap could go up again. So when you factor all of that in, I want to see how aggressive. Obviously, Ryan Rigmaiden got real aggressive when it came to Keon Hatcher. How does that impact the rest of the market? Do we see more players around, the high 200s and 300,000 mark?
What is it? What does the Harris signing do maybe with the quarterback market? What are you maybe curious on there?
Well, I think I'm more curious than anything to see what happens with Cody Fajardo, right? And he's not going to get Trevor Harris money, and so we'll see, right? I know that he is. From everybody I've talked to around Cody, and I haven't talked to Cody about it directly, he wants to be back playing. But I know that his position with the organization is I've got to see what my family wants and look at life after football options and things like that. So, I don't know that any of those options are going to pay him more than Edmonton will, but Edmonton's also not going to talk to Cody Fajardo about a deal in the 500,000 range. I just don't see that happening, and I don't believe that he's got leverage with other teams around the league trying to bring him in and make him their guy. So, he's going to have that, come to Jesus moment. How bad do I want to play? And let's get this thing done so the organization can move forward with the rest of the signings and business that they've got to do to make Edmonton better.
I'm curious on obviously would love to be a fly on the wall in Jeremy O'Day's room, but where does this now leave them as far as number 2 to Trevor Harris? Because that guy's going to play next year. How many games he plays, who knows? Mayer, does he want to come back in that role? Is it Jack Cohn's time? What does your gut say there, Farhan?
I think they want to bring Mayer back, and I think I would have him ahead of Jack Cohn in my mind, and he's not an old player, right? So It's just a case of what you think your ceiling is going to be and who you think your quarterback might be in 2027 or 2028, right? And if you think that Cohn's ceiling is higher, then maybe you invest there by making him the number 2. And then I think Mayer's going to look around and see what else is out there because, he's kind of at that time. He's done the apprentice thing under Trevor for 2 years, and, now he's got to figure it out. And again, as we talk about Cody Fajardo, I don't think there's a bunch of teams that are looking to bring Jake Mayer in to be their starter. And that's not a shot at Jake. It's just a reflection of what the rest of the quarterback landscape is league-wide, where everybody's got their guy, right? So other than Edmonton, there's not necessarily a debate there as to who the guy is going to be. So I think they'd like to bring Jake back. And in the end, I think if they can make it work, I think he comes back. For my money, I think Jake Mayer was the best backup quarterback in the league. Maybe doesn't have the ceiling, but he certainly got a really, really high floor. So I think it was a really good fit for him working behind Trevor Harris.
I was thinking that too, but then I was like, who was the backup in Edmonton? Start of the year, it was like, we had Fajardo, his great backup. But it is Farhan Lalji joining us, our football insider from TSN for the Cooperators. I want to, have you heard anything? I kind of teased it, thinking you might know anything on the Corey Mace Toronto investigation. What really happened there? Do we know any more clarity?
Yeah, I think the investigation is ongoing, and I believe that the league is taking this very seriously, right? I don't think they're just going through the motions here. So I do think that there's something there. And we talked about it before that, we do believe that some level of indirect contact was made, not with Corey directly, but with, whether it's his representatives or people who know him really well, or just some way to get a second or third hand indication as to whether or not he would even consider anything like that. And again, we talked about it last week. There was nothing meaningful there. Like, I don't think he ever seriously considered it from that standpoint, but I do think something happened. And again, I think the league is taking it seriously, and I think there will be I think something's going to happen here. We'll see what it looks like. I'm not going to necessarily going to speculate as to what that's going to be, but I do think it'll be more than a slap on the wrist.
Why do I think that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the offensive coordinator position there is weird? Like, you still have a guy in your hiring. Like, the body's not cold.
Well, it was weird last year, right? They waited until free agency had happened. And it's not like they were interviewing a big, long list of candidates. They just kind of navel-gazed their way through the process, and eventually they got Jason Hogan out of it. So, yeah, formally Hogan's still employed. They've already interviewed Tommy Condell and Mike Miller. Miller's obviously going to be the head coach in Toronto, so he's not a factor. Condell makes way too much sense for it to not be him, but, Winnipeg does things differently, right? So, the relationship that Condell has with Zach Caleros, I think it's the only logical solution. I don't think they're seriously considering Jarius Jackson, which I think could be a logical solution as well, but it doesn't sound like at this point that's the direction they're leaning. So if you talk to Tommy Condell and you know that your quarterback absolutely loves him, what are you waiting for? Get on with it.
Do you like the Miller signing in Toronto? Is that kind of the only play at this point?
Well, when you look at the list of candidates, right? I think Campbell was a viable candidate because he'd done it before, and he'd been through a situation previously where there was some some challenge in terms of what the team was dealing with logistically. But Mike Miller and his relationship with Chad Kelly, I think that trumps it, because they've invested in Chad Kelly. Chad Kelly is going to be their quarterback next year. So you better do everything in your power to make sure that Chad Kelly's in the best position to succeed. And his relationship with Mike Miller allows for that to happen. And then you bring in a guy like John Huffnagel to provide some additional support, both from a coaching and management standpoint. And so we'll see what they bring in for the rest of the staff, what the defensive coordinator is going to look like. But Miller's got a really good resume, right? This is the one thing he doesn't have on it, and I think he's earned an opportunity. So hopefully everything else around Chad Kelly works itself out, and it kind of health-wise he's fine. There's no drama and other stuff going around him as we progress through an 18-game season. But I think they believe that Mike Miller gives them the best opportunity to get the most out of a really good quarterback when his head's in the right place.
Okay, let's shift to what are you doing in Miami? That doesn't look like the football stadium.
I'm in Miami. No, well, actually, a college team plays here. I think Florida Atlantic plays here, and I am not covering a Florida Atlanta game. But I'm here for the MLS Cup. The Vancouver Whitecaps are playing Miami, Inter Miami. So it's Messi versus Thomas Muller. So, two big-name players in the world of soccer for the MLS Cup. First time the Whitecaps have made it to this point, so they decided to send me down. And, I December, right? Like, I could go to Vancouver where it's raining. I could go to Regina where it's snowing, or I could come here. And guess what I've chosen?
Big World Cup news coming down tomorrow, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tomorrow's the World Cup draw. And, I think in terms of a non-sporting event, this is as big a sporting event as there is that doesn't involve actual gameplay and competition. Like, the entire world is going to be fixated on this. Like, millions and millions of people are going to watch this draw to see where their teams are going to wind up, both in terms of the group, in terms of location. So, all the players that are playing in the game on Saturday are going to be paying full attention to what's going on tomorrow. It is going to captivate the soccer world for sure.
How big is the Thursday nighter, the NFL game, as we kick things off? How big is this game?
I think it's huge, because Dallas in the last 3 games they've won, and they've all of a sudden got people interested. And the Cowboys are that team, right, where they'll go like this, they'll reel you back in, and then you get in, and then you get your heart broken, right? And when you looked at their schedule in the last couple of games to play Philadelphia, then Kansas City, now Detroit, and then Minnesota, and they got, in my opinion, through the 2 toughest, because Detroit's stumbling a bit as well. I mean, and Kansas City was too, in fairness, and Philly, I guess, now too. When you look at the last few weeks, so all these teams have kind of been taking a bit of a step back, and Detroit and Minnesota even all of a sudden don't look as daunting as when the schedule first came out. So Dallas is in a really good position here. Their defense has started to play well, and if they can get through these 2 games, it's going to get even easier for them the rest of the way. And for Detroit, they got to find a way to get it figured back out and get this thing back on the tracks, because it hasn't looked good for them 2 of the last 3 games.
The thing I read this morning was NFL Next Gen. Lions playoff chances improved to 59% with a win tonight. They fall to 22% with a loss. And then the Cowboys go 31 with a win, and they go 6 with a loss. And I had no idea this game meant so much playoff-wise. So it should be a good watch. The last thing I want to ask you, and I know I don't know if you're going over to cover the Olympics and all that, but just as a veteran broadcaster, reporter, everything, what are you making of the hockey rink in Milan?
I think it's ridiculous, and I'm initially, when they made the decision to not play international ice because they were going to be, building a new rink anyway. I go back to one of my first Olympic experiences, 2004 in Athens, and 2006 in Turin in Italy wasn't much different, where everything happened in the very last second. And I remember in sitting down with the organizers at a press conference a couple of days before the Olympics, and kind of the what was said was basically, well, if you wanted us to have it ready early, why didn't you tell us, right? Because they do things differently in Europe. So the fact that we're dealing with this at this stage, and they've started the building and they can't get the size right, is 3 or 4 feet going to matter that much? Hard to say, but the fact that you're dealing with this, it just makes me think, European Olympics, par for the course, and disappointing for all that as well.
It's going to be an interesting watch over the next little bit. All right. Well, you have fun down there. Obviously, like I said, jealous. And we'll catch up next week. Thanks for doing this on Thursday.
Thanks, Barney. We'll talk soon.